If there's one thing I love, it's the annual convening at Davos of the World Economic Forum, where billionaires gather to say things that the rest of the world finds to be deeply insensitive, obnoxious, and downright insane. This year, our contestant is JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, who had some thoughts on socialism. Let's take a listen.
Take care of everybody if you have a better growing economy.
You've long said you were barely a Democrat. I think you said that here many, many years ago. You look at this election. Is there a Democrat you like?
Yeah, I like a lot of the moderates. I'm not a socialist. I think capitalism is the greatest thing that ever happened to mankind. I think people who haven't read the history books about socialism really should. I think we got to educate our younger kids. Freedom and free enterprise are inextricably linked. They are not different. I mean, you can't tell people where you can work or how you're going to work or where you're going to. Free enterprise was the pursuit of happiness. And, you know, once you have governments taking control of businesses, it ends up in corruption.
Joining us now to discuss all of this is fellow at the Open Markets Institute, Matt Stoller, friend of the show. Good to see you, Matt.
How are you loving all that freedom?
Yeah, nothing says freedom and enterprise like getting a $400 million bailout.
Bang
from the
bailout.
Like talking about it from a Swiss chalet. It's like perfect. Yeah, he's like, you can't tell other people what to do. Only I can tell other people what to do.
Well, that's it.
No. Well, I mean, just talk to us broadly about this, just like how the Wall Street industry, because you see a lot of this right now. I see it from the right. A lot of them have a vested interest in pushing this social. I mean, they call any market intervention, even against people, either fascism or socialism. And yet, these are the people who have accepted hundreds of billions of dollars in bailouts in 2008. I mean, broadly, while the American public has suffered.
Right. I mean, what the irony here is that JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon, these guys are actually have a lot in common with the central planners, because that's what they want to do. They want to centralize wealth and power in their hands and give orders. So there was this expression in the 1930s. Robert Jackson said, "What the capitalist seeks because of his greed, the socialist seeks because of his creed." And when he was talking about not today's socialists, who are basically just social democrats, he was talking about communists and fascists, who each wanted ironclad control over other people. And that's what Jamie Dimon wants, right? So there's a long history here, and I can go over some of it and what he did during the bailouts. But the fundamental point here is that Jamie Dimon wants socialism for himself. And they want to use the government through lots of different ways to create a legal framework where he's in control, his friends are in control, and we the people are not.
Yeah.
And he's at the vanguard of this movement in the business community, this sort of like faux liberal movement to try to make some reforms around the edges so that they can be less easily vilified to the American public. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, so a couple of months ago, the Business Roundtable came out. This is the organization of CEOs. I love that.
I covered it here.
Yeah,
these are all like right. But so these are all like open. Conspiracy theorists are like not wrong. It's just they're wrong usually, but they're like not more wrong than the mainstream people.
True,
so it's like, but like the Business Roundtable, you could just read their minutes. I mean, that's like the conspiracy theory right there. There's a bunch of Fortune 500 CEOs, and they came out and they said, we're not going to pursue shareholder capitalism anymore. We're going to look at stakeholder capitalism. So we're going to have multiple different groups that are going to, we exist as a social enterprise, not just to make money for our shareholders. And it sort of sounds kind of good, but in fact, it's a kind of disturbing way of saying, really don't look to government, don't look to democratic institutions, look to us to solve your social problems, right? So there's a sort of soft autocracy underneath the kind of happy rhetoric.
Right, and it's also underlying that the context is, we see the pitchforks coming, so we're going to do the minimum possible to keep them at bay.
And they want to shape the debate.
And let's keep the power here rather than letting the government do what it needs to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's much easier to control people if you control how they think, right? So this is a way of saying, we're not the bad guys. The bad guys are, somebody else, whoever that is. Look, the target. It's just kind of confusing everyone, and I guess so that's kind of the point. And they see a significant pivot point. They see a really serious change. They notice Trump. And what they want to do is use this opportunity to acquire and centralize more power and sort of take away. We have a lot of freedom in this country. We do have a lot of democracy. I know it feels very despondent right now, but they want to take what we have left away instead of letting us take away their liberty to control us.
They want us to be dependent on them, basically.
At the same time, Lee Fang from The Intercept, he highlighted how Dimon had actually recently attended a healthcare conference, and he congratulated the healthcare industry on basically increasing their market cap from $500 million to $6 trillion. And I'm like, that is kind of crazy, because they're basically bragging about extracting wealth from the healthcare industry, which fundamentally is supposed to be about helping sick people. So, that is truly how they view industry whenever these people get involved in it.
Thanks, Obama.
Yeah, I think that's what's so strange about this current moment, where you have market-based systems, and markets can be structured in endless numbers of ways, right? And we have a lot of financial markets that are structured in ways that privilege people like Jamie Dimon, but he's so divorced from the lived experience of everyday people that he's bragging, when he brags about the increase in market capitalization, what he's essentially saying is, it's great, we have more balanced bills, we're able to extract more money from sick people, or from people who are afraid of getting sick. And that shows up on our spreadsheet as increased kind of net worth. And he doesn't understand, or he doesn't care about the suffering and the fear that induces over all of us. And I think that's really important. But just to give you a sense of how much socialism Jamie Dimon has imbibed, before the financial crisis, he was a wealthy man. He was worth tens of millions of dollars. After the financial crisis, when his bank, among others, lost more money than any banks have ever lost in history, he was a billionaire. Wow. Right? And that billionaire, that money didn't come from profit that his bank made. It came from us. It came from the taxpayers. I can go into the details, but it's just exhausting. This is a guy who has a political vision, and that political vision does not involve sharing power.
Wow.
And it's amazing to me when I look at a guy like that, and he sees himself as a Democrat. Honestly, how do you end up with the Democratic Party where Jamie Dimon feels at home?
Yeah.
I think that's a really important, I read a lot about the Democratic Party and the Obama administration, and going back to the Clinton administration. And I think you see this fight in both parties, right? And Trump was really a reaction to the corruption of the Bush administration and the refusal to admit that they were wrong about a lot of different things. And I think the current fight is in the Democratic Party is over that same dynamic in the Obama and Clinton administration. They're really plutocrats, right? And they made the party friendly to Jamie Dimon. And Democratic voters tend to be really passive aggressive, and they think that politics is about being nice to everyone, and they don't want to polarize. And so when AOC said we need to kick some of these people out of the party, it generated a huge backlash, because people were like, how dare you? But the reality is, we don't want, you don't want a David Duke in your party, right?
Right.
You don't want a whole series of bad actors in your party. Building a political party is about choosing a set of values and choosing a coalition to achieve them. And I think right now both parties are sort of making the case. I'm not analogizing Jamie Dimon, Dave Duke. What I'm saying is that political parties are both about the act of inclusion and about the act of exclusion. And we have to have that debate.
Because the reality is, when you have people like Jamie Dimon, with the amount of wealth and power that he has inside your party, they're going to be disproportionately influential. So if you want to center the values of a different coalition, it is going to be hard to do that and keep the Jamie Dimons in the fold.
That's exactly right. And the fact that he feels, I'm more disturbed by the fact that he feels comfortable in the Democratic Party and what that actually says about us. Because I kind of go back and forth. I'm like, he's not a Democrat, and then I'm like, well, maybe I'm not a Democrat. Right? It could be either one, right? And that's kind of what this election, and it's hard to come to grips with that. It's really depressing.
It is. Well, all I can say is please keep him, because we don't want him. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you joining us.
Coming up, the latest polls tell us how the 2020 candidates are doing nationally and across generations. Very interesting stuff. That is next.